That we go to the gentlelady from Utah, Ms. Love, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Do the standards for credit bureaus different from the standards for other sectors of the economy? If so, how, why? And I want to get into the European cybersecurity initiatives as just to follow up from the chairman's questions.
Sure. The national credit reporting agencies are subject to the FTC's safeguards rule, which is the rule that applies to, under the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, to non-bank financial entities. So there's no data security standard for most companies in the country, but financial institutions have standards. So if you're a bank, you're covered by your prudential regulator, but if you don't have a prudential regulator like the OCC or the Federal Reserve, then you're subject to the FTC's safeguards rule, and the credit bureaus are one kind of company that's subject to that.
Okay, so I guess this is opinion for everyone. I'm interested in the European standards. How do you view these standards? Do you think that these standards are going to be influential? I just wanted to follow up because I think that I agree with the chairman. I would hate to have somebody else dictate what we do. So I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on that. And anyone can answer. I'm just...
I'll kick it off because I'll be very brief. Generally speaking, our reading is that for credit bureaus specifically, there would not be much impact from it because we are collecting, as credit bureaus, very narrow parts of the larger information environment. Again, as I said, we're collecting the do you have credit, how much credit, with whom, do you pay on time, and those sorts of, that sort of information is part of an ongoing business relationship that you have with your lender, right? So if you have a credit card account, that credit card company is reporting that information up, and that would continue even under GDPR. The larger data broker issue would come into, is more implicated by that, and that's not a part of the environment that I generally work in.
Okay.
Thanks for the question. With respect to the GDPR, there are a few different requirements particular to breach. As I mentioned previously, there is a without undue delay standard for consumers, and with respect to notifications to regulatory authorities, there's where feasible, but not later than 72 hours language. I would additionally say, to speak to the chairman's question that he teed up at the outset, it's premature to be looking to the GDPR as a best practice for anything, in my opinion, to the extent that it hasn't been implemented yet. It's going to be implemented this May. There are a lot of questions regarding how certain provisions are going to be implemented, particularly around data breach. So I would say I wouldn't worry too much yet about that particular issue. There are also a variety of cybersecurity standards which, in Europe that have been proposed that I'll also be happy to get into. But
is it important to keep an eye on that and to kind of look on how that affects?
It's definitely important because, again, all of our companies are global companies doing business globally, so they're going to have to comply with that if they're doing business in Europe or doing business with European citizens. So it's important. I'm just commenting on not looking to something that hasn't yet been implemented to see if it can be implemented as designed. I think it's premature to do that.
Do you have any concerns with the present model? I know you're concerned about, because you don't know how it's going to be, what the reaction is going to be or what the results are going to be, but do you have any concerns with the way that it's set up and what the standards are currently?
Well, again, as a number of witnesses, I think all the witnesses have said at one point or another today, having a very tight timeline for any notification, such as 72 hours, is very problematic. Just because, again, and we can point to lots and lots of high-profile breaches. You can look at some of the government breaches like OPM. It takes months sometimes to even realize there's been a breach and then to figure out what exactly is going on. So 72-hour provision, in many instances, is going to be impossible to comply with.
Do they have that in their standard? They have a 72-hour?
They have a 72-hour for notification to regulators, but not for notification to citizens.
Okay.
So
do you have anything that you mentioned? You look like you had something that you wanted to add.
I would just agree with what Mr. Miller, the point he made about it might be a little too early to make any judgment calls on GDPR. I know many of FSR's members are global in nature, and so it is already, there's already a tremendous amount of discussion going on as to how do we come into compliance with this
Thank
and
you.
make that system work.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. With that, we go